everyone, welcome to the Christ Pearls channel. Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite books. It's called 100 Signs of the Times by David J. Ridges. Now he is a former CES instructor. He's written tons of different textbooks for pretty much all the standard works. He's a pretty famous author, or LDS author I should say. And I wanted to just kind of go through his list of 100 signs. So this book started out as, I think it was 50 Signs of the Times when it originally came out. And over the years, he's done several different editions and updates. And there aren't more signs per se, so much as he split some of the ones that are all lumped together out into their own separate category to get to this number 100, which is the latest edition. This one was written, I think, a few years ago. I got it in 2020. I just had gotten the updated one just so I had like an e-copy, because I have an actual hardbound book of the previous edition, which I think was 96 Signs of the Times. And then his newer one had 100. And he just broke them all out into just, like the calamities, commotion, all those things, just kind of like broke them all down. So I wanted to go through that. Now, what's really cool about his book is, I'm just going to scroll up here. I have all these notes. This is something that I made a long time ago. I've been using it as I guess you could say, study guide for me as I've studied the Signs of the Times. So basically what I do is I'll just kind of look at different things that are going on and kind of figure out, I guess, what goes to what sign. So like sometimes I'll see different things happening in current events and I'll kind of like be thinking about it in these terms. And I've used it as a template for a study group that I do. And that's kind of what I wanted to go over today, is just show how in his book he lists out each sign and then he'll categorize it. So he has these categories of already fulfilled, being fulfilled, and yet to be fulfilled, or unsure. There's a couple where he's unsure, just because the sign is more vague. And usually these are signs where you'll see a lot of scholarly debate. There's conflict or difference of opinion between either scholarship and the brethren, or even among the brethren. They may have differing opinions about a certain verse of scripture or a sign that it's related to. One of those would be this one: a man named David will lead the church. And I want to do a separate study on that. I have a lot of commentary I've collected. I guess you could say, the two different points of view. There's kind of the classic one that this is Jesus, which he noted here. He says might mean Savior during millennial reign, but has been often misinterpreted to be people like David O. McKay, David B. Haight, recently David A. Bednar, also D. Todd Christofferson. So he kind of notes that this is one of those signs where there's a lot of scholarly debate. And like Bruce R. McConkie's quotes will differ from some scholars. There's even BYU research papers on this. So I'm going to do a separate one on this. I've actually been putting this together, and I'll just give you a sneak preview. But I have all of this commentary that I've been collecting, and I've found just different church points of view on it versus maybe like some scholarly points of view. And this will probably end up being a really long video, because I think what I'm going to end up doing is literally just reading the commentary and reading some of these verses. I also have a paper by Dr. Abraham Gileadi that talks about this. This is an article that I found by Victor L. Ludlow. So there's just lots of opinions, I guess you could say, about what this sign really truly means. And I also have commentary from a book that I read called Prophecy, Key to the Future, which I also want to do a feature on for this channel, just about that book, because it's all about the signs of the times. And I haven't gotten that one all put together. I have to pull it from my study group still into, I guess, this spreadsheet. I'm just going to use it because it's helpful for me to have it for presenting this information for you guys. So today we'll focus just on reading through these signs of the times, and he has all of these different scriptures, and then I suppose in the future I may pull out some of these signs and kind of go more in depth on them. Maybe we'll read some of the scriptures, but he provides a little bit of commentary and the verses where they're like the main verses for that sign. Some of these have like tons of verses, but he kind of goes through and bullet points out the main ones. So sorry, you can hear my kids in the background probably. I can't really do much about that. I'm a mom, so I hope you guys can forgive my little children for being loud and fighting with each other and playing with each other loudly. So hopefully we can still enjoy this video. Okay, so here's the list of signs. So I'm just going to read them, and then I guess that'll probably be more where I leave it, because I'd like to get in and like dig into some of these. I think the ones that I want to talk about are these first ones. So skipping this first, a man named David will lead the church, since that's kind of its own separate long topic. I want to look at these next few signs because these all pertain to the restoration. I think these are key signs. I covered some of these in the allegory of the olive trees videos that I did, where I just went really in depth on the connections and structure for the allegory of the olive tree, and basically tried to show how the way that the church is interpreting it in your Institute manual is the right way to look at it. And it's mostly because of the cross-references that pertain to these signs. So reading through these, the first one is a man named David will lead the church. And it seems that this is a title. And then we'll kind of dig into that more at another time. The next one is the discovery of America and the establishment of the United States of America. And I think we all kind of understand that it was important for the United States and the Constitution to be developed so that at some point Joseph Smith could be born and the gospel could be restored in a country that would allow the church to grow. Well, that happened. A prophet named Joseph was raised up. That's Joseph Smith. He helped to restore all of the priesthood keys and covenants to the earth, and the Lord used him as an instrument, and he provided all of this for us. The coming forth of the Book of Mormon, the restoration of the priesthood and the priesthood keys, the restoration of the true church of Jesus Christ. Once restored in the last dispensation, the true church will never again be lost through apostasy. And this is one that I focused on with the allegory of the olive trees, because sometimes I've noticed that allegory can be misunderstood when people especially are not referring to the Institute manual and they're looking at it, I guess, just through their own lens. And, sometimes they'll think that there is going to be some other great apostasy, that the church institutionally will apostatize. That's just not part of the plan, okay? And that was why I did that video on the allegory of the olive trees, is to show that once restored in the last days, the true church will never again be lost through apostasy. And you get this from studying all of these signs. You'll start to notice that there are key points in every single prophecy, and they all have to do with a couple of hinge points. One is the great apostasy that happens right after Jesus Christ fulfills the atonement and the resurrection. And then the next one is the restoration. It's Joseph Smith restoring the gospel from all previous dispensations. And then the promises that are associated with the seventh dispensation are that the gospel will never again be taken from the earth, the keys will remain, the church will grow to fill the entire earth, which is another sign. So sign number 8 says the church will be established in the top of the mountains. This is one where it's fulfilled and being fulfilled. So the church has been established in the top of the mountains in Salt Lake City, but this also pertains to Old Jerusalem and other prophecies. So it's sort of like, I guess you could say it has dual fulfillment, and it's partially fulfilled at this point. Now the church will grow to fill the entire earth. This is from Daniel 2, and it's the stone cut out of the mountain without hands. So the other one is the Civil War will start in South Carolina. This is something that Joseph Smith prophesied, and he was right about it. It did start in South Carolina, and a lot of people could have predicted that a civil war would start in those days because of the political climate at the time. Hey, but not a lot of people could have predicted that it would have started in South Carolina, but Joseph Smith did. And then slaves will rise up against their masters. This is like one of those signs where it just has many connotations. So it can be lots of different interpretations. I mean, obviously one has to do with the Civil War, but then there's lots of other types of this, I guess you could say the idea that it's conveying that also happen even to this very day. So that's kind of an ongoing fulfilled and yet to be fulfilled sign. And then the other is a full end of all nations. This is obviously for the future. Scattered Israel will be gathered. This is happening now, and it'll complete as we move forward in time. It's something that will happen in large part to prepare for the second coming, but then it also continues through the millennium as we continue to do work for the dead and continue to gather the Lord's people. And then all will hail their gospel in their own tongue. This is something that is fulfilled and being fulfilled, and the church is doing the work of trying to translate scriptures into many languages, especially the Book of Mormon, and I think that's something that we're seeing happening now. Righteousness and truth will sweep the earth as with a flood. That's also something I think we see ongoing, happening now. The church will be brought out of obscurity. I feel like President Hinckley played a huge role in this because he helped to really put the church on the map, I think, in the public sphere, maybe because of his background with journalism and just broadcasting in general. He was really good at that, and I think that is fulfilled. Also, we have the name of Joseph Smith will be spoken of for good and evil in all nations. I mean, this is definitely something we see every day, right? Mother Earth will rejoice to finally be free of wickedness. Still waiting for that day. The 10 tribes will return. This is sort of another one that has kind of many connotations, many ideas pertaining to it. One of those ways that this is happening is just gathering scattered Israel right now. And then there's also, I guess you could say, some differences of opinion. You'll notice as you dig into this and look at commentary by prophets and apostles that in the early days of the church, it was viewed that there was going to be a large body of tribes that would come forward. And then that kind of shifts, and you see that less basically from Spencer W. Kimball on. And the way you can kind of see that is by putting all the quotes together and just kind of looking at all of the data. So I'm just going to pull this up. I love the work that Jared from Christian Homestead has done in organizing quotes in chronological order into a spreadsheet, and I have a lot of commentary of my own. So I had copied a lot of the quotes that I like and that I like on the topics that I'm studying, and I've just been kind of adding my own in there. And so I'm just going to show you really quick because he's done his own videos about this, so I don't want to rehash things that you can go look up on his channel. But he had put all of this stuff together in chronological order just so that you could see how over time the prophetic witness shifts. And this is, I think, the best way to study any topic, really truly. It's to look up all the scriptures and all the commentary, put them in chronological order, and then just go from there. And I have scholarly commentary too that I could add to the Lost Tribes. Most of the scholarly commentary I have is probably leaning more towards that it's not a big, large body. They are being gathered out of the world. But I do have some that kind of looks more to those early days where maybe it is like a main group or a large body. One of the most recent ones I have was in the book Second Coming of the Lord by Gerald Lund, and he is kind of like on the fence about it. He feels like it could be both. That's kind of, I guess, where I've sort of had my book open on the table, so to speak, is that I keep an open mind about it because I do see how there's some idea of like an end time exodus that happens like literally right before the second coming. And so sometimes I wonder if maybe this is like fulfilled and also yet to be fulfilled. Now, as far as the polar ice cap and all the hidden in the world stuff or off-world theories, I kind of shy away from those personally just because I don't see enough commentary that like really supports that. There's a few obscure quotes, but I think obscure quotes are the ones that I tend to take with a grain of salt, and I look more toward the consistent collective witness, and that's why I think putting it in this type of format will help in your study so that you can see what that collective witness is. So I'm not going to go through and read all of these. You can access his spreadsheet online. This is just a tab I had copied, and I have every intention of adding some scholarly commentary, but I'm probably going to put it in a separate tab of my own just by topic because kind of like his A to Z quotes one, because I don't really want to mess this up. And occasionally I like to go and see what other quotes he finds and adds. So I kind of utilize that as a tool, and I appreciate that so much. I told him I love his spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. I work in them myself. As you can see, I have my own. And yeah, I think this is just a really good way to look at it. So I feel like when you study it this way, you'll see that right around the time of Spencer W. Kimball, this is where the shift occurred, because prior to him, you get more leaning toward maybe like a main group. So you'll see how he has main group. He just means a large body of people. And I feel like there have been times where that's happened. Like we've had missionaries go to Pacific Islands and converted, hundreds of people. We've had in the early days of the church, like the English mission, for example, in the 1840s, they brought over like 1,000 saints from Europe. There was like thousands of people that converted. So there are times where there have been large bodies of people who are lost tribes. And we know this from their patriarchal blessings. We know this from previous videos that I just covered where we talked about literal descendants and how many members of the church are literal descendants of blood Israel. And they had to be gathered out so that they can do their mission of taking the gospel to all of the nations of the world. And so, I don't know, I guess if you look at it maybe from that bird's eye view, you sort of get a little bit more insight about what this means, and you can apply that however you want to your own study. This is just a tool that I think has worked really well for me. So I just want to kind of, sorry, my kids are running around here, but I just wanted to kind of like point that out and show you that this is a really great format for analyzing prophetic commentary or scholarly commentary or both. So back to the signs. Okay, so let's see, where did we leave off here? 10 tribes. So the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled. So this is really interesting because there's this whole presentation that I saw from the Isaiah Institute, and maybe at one point I'll go over it with you guys. But it was given by Rodolfo Vergara. He's like a contributor to Isaiah Institute, so he volunteers and he just does really great presentations. I always really love his presentations, and he dug really deep into Ephraim's birthright, what it means, serving as kings and queens of the Gentiles. He talks about the Book of Mormon, how when it's talking to the Gentiles, it's mainly speaking to those of us who are coming out of the Gentile nations. In the end time, the Gentile nations receive the gospel first, and then they bring it back to the original house of Israel. So he goes over all of that. And again, this is a little bit different context than like when the prophets are saying, hey, you are blood Israel that we've gathered out. And most members of the church have Israelite blood, and your patriarchal blessing is telling you your lineage. This is like a little bit separate than that. So anyway, he just does a really great job of putting all this together in a way that is easier to understand. At least for me it was. So anyway, sorry, I have to keep pausing because my kids are so loud. I've been trying to tell them to be quiet, but it's hard. They have rowdy days. So anyway, I just wanted to scroll through this and show you some of the things that I've gotten from the Isaiah Institute, and it is scholarly work. I feel like you have to treat it, like in that scholarly realm, that kind of gospel theory, esoteric space where you take what you can out of it, and then you just sort of make sure that it aligns with the core eternal doctrine. So, you've got core eternal doctrine, you have supporting teachings. This can come from scholars, this can come from the brethren of the church, this can come from our institute manuals, from all the gospel library app resources. We have policies that can kind of shed some light on core eternal doctrine, and then we have the esoteric teachings, which are more like gospel theory. And so wherever you see some discrepancies, like what we were talking about with the quotes about the lost 10 tribes and how there is some discrepancy, like maybe from the past to the present in terms of how it's viewed, you just have to kind of realize that there's this space right here where maybe not all the answers are clear, but the core eternal doctrine should remain the same. Like, for example, about the fact that there will be a restoration of the tribes to their lands of inheritance, to their blessings, all of these things. This is core doctrine. And then exactly how that happens is in that esoteric space. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense. But I just kind of wanted to show that sometimes you can use resources like this that are maybe not in your gospel library app, but they do shed light on things. Like here, for example, he shows you all the different references to the Gentiles so that you can understand context and like kind of differentiate between, when God is speaking to us as nations, as like Gentile nations, people, like collectively as big, large groups, versus like when he's talking to like his covenant people and he's counseling his covenant people to do a work. So you just have to start to see that. And then I think that it kind of starts making sense how there's all these different contexts. And in certain contexts, we are the Gentiles that the prophets are talking to. We're those Gentile nations who need to repent. We're those Gentile nations who receive the gospel in the last days. But we're also like, in terms of us joining the church and becoming a member of the church and getting on the covenant path, in that regard, we're trying to become sons and daughters to the Lord. We're trying to be reconciled to our, in many cases, literal heritage, which is that we do have the blood of Israel in us. Most people do, and if they don't, then they're adopted in. So those are some previous videos where I covered that allegory of the olive trees one, and then one that's about literal descendants. And he kind of gets into that a little bit, but it's just to help us understand our role, that as the Gentile nations, that have received the gospel in the latter days through the prophet Joseph Smith. We've received the Book of Mormon. We don't want to treat it lightly. We need to bring that to all the world. I mean, this is our role, and we want to fulfill that role of being, nursing mothers and fathers and kings and queens. And it's like we want to become basically the promised blessings that the Lord has in store. Like we want to be able to fulfill the role that God has for us in terms of bringing the gospel to the world. And he really dives deep into that. And I don't want to go over this whole thing because I feel like this is kind of his presentation and I don't want to try to give that away. But I just feel like sometimes it helps me to look at things like that and kind of see those perspectives, that scholarship that people do that can help me understand more about the context of the things that I'm reading. Okay, so let's see here. So the times of the Gentiles, it pertains to Ephraim, and that was kind of what I was trying to get at, is it has to do with Ephraim's birthright. When Ephraim fulfills his role, this is when the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled. So this is something that's happening now, and it hasn't been completely fulfilled, in my opinion, just because there's just so many parts to this. But it is something that it feels like that time is fast approaching. Okay, so there will be much despair, depression, emotional instability, and gloom and doom. This, in spite of gross wickedness and spiritual darkness upon the earth, the Lord's covenant people will be preserved. There will be extraordinarily widespread selfishness and lack of caring for others. Couples will avoid marriage and openly live together. The mark of the beast in their foreheads, so this is highly symbolic. We can do an episode on that if you guys are interested in that. I have a lot of commentary from the book of Revelation. Great tribulation among the wicked, ever learning and never coming to the knowledge of the truth. Widespread suppression of personal conscience. The Jews will return to Jerusalem. That's something that's been happening since the early 1900s, maybe even the late 1800s. The Jews accept the true gospel. So that hasn't really happened yet. Not in large part like what the scriptures associated with this imply. But I feel like, just the fact that we're seeing some of these other signs point to this coming in a future day. And there is actually a whole issue in the ensign that's about the Holy Land. And I had sent this also, I think, a long time ago to Jared from Christian Homestead. I know he did an episode on a couple articles from it in his channel a long time ago. And I was the one that shared that with him. I don't think he remembers, but I had tagged him in it because I had shared it in my group, my study group. And that talks all about this right here. The Jews will return to Jerusalem. The Jews accept the true gospel. The whole issue is about that. And I'll find that for you guys and we can look at that sometime. But it's in one of the maybe like 72, somewhere in there, the 70s. There's like a whole Holy Land issue of the ensign. You can look it up in the Gospel Library app. It's really interesting. And then the prophet Elijah will come to restore the keys of sealing. This is fulfilled, right? He came to the Kirtland Temple. The saints will be few in number, but the power of God will be with them. I think this is true. I think that's happening now. Christ will come to his temple. This is one of those that's fulfilled and yet to be fulfilled because there's many key appearances of Jesus Christ, and some of those are fulfilled and some of them aren't yet. Genealogical research and widespread interest in family history will spread as never before. I feel like that's happening. Dangers upon the waters, widespread despising of good people. Much ecological damage will occur in the last days. Various forms of indulgences will be in use. The sun will be darkened and the moon will become as blood. This is another one where, like, President Hinckley had talked about this being fulfilled in, it was, I think, the October conference right after September 11th happened in 2001. He mentioned this, and I would say for the most part it's probably fulfilled. But when you really dig into this, there are several, I guess you could say, fulfillments of it, and some of them do seem to be more connected to when Jesus Christ actually comes in glory to the earth. So that's another one that might be fun to dig into because it's one of those signs that, like, it's happened, but the author has it as, like, if I remember right, I think he has it as yet to be fulfilled, or maybe it was fulfilled and being fulfilled, but the way I feel about it is it was fulfilled and being fulfilled, or yet to be fulfilled. And then the church will become well known throughout the earth. That's happened. Disease, plagues, and pestilences will sweep the earth in spite of medical advances and technology. Knowledge, science, and technology will increase dramatically. I think when you look at the increase of science, technology, and all of these things since 1820, you'll definitely see a sharp increase that as soon as the restoration occurred, our knowledge of just all of this stuff increased dramatically, and the world kind of hit its stride in terms of advancement. Okay, and then the weak things of the earth shall break down the mighty and strong ones. And I really like this. This is one that's, I would say, maybe fulfilled and being fulfilled, but I feel like it started with the prophet Joseph Smith. I think he's a prime example of the weak things of the earth breaking down the mighty and strong ones. And I feel like that continues to happen day by day. It's part of that stone cut out of the mountain without hands. The righteous will have extra oil for their lamps. So we definitely want to be those people. Wars and rumors of wars will become normal life. The last days scourges of the Lord will increase right up to the second coming. Famines, earthquakes, tornadoes, and natural disasters will abound. Additional scriptures will be published. Okay, so this is one that's fulfilled, and it's like being fulfilled and yet to be fulfilled. And we have additional scriptures that have come to us through the prophet Joseph Smith, like the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price, for example, plus the Book of Mormon. I mean, prior to the Restoration, none of that existed. So this is one that's, it has multiple fulfillments, and there will be more. And no doubt during the millennium, more will be written. So I think that's an ongoing one. Strikes, overthrowing of governments, gang warfare, violence, and disrespect for authority will increase. There'll be much widespread disrespect for that which is sacred and holy. Sexual immorality, homosexuality, and pornography will abound. Much bloodshed will precede the second coming. The disintegration of the family will bring prophesied calamities in the last days. And truly, the family proclamation was totally prophetic. I mean, it's something that, to me, I still refer back to constantly because I see the correlation with the decline of society and the disintegration of the family. The Spirit will stop working with the wicked. Peace will be taken from the earth. Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling to those who attempt to fight against it. I would say that's something that is happening. It's been happening in our day probably since the 20th century. Many will claim that miracles have ceased. Miracles will abound. Secret combinations and works of darkness will permeate societies. People will deny the power of God. Leaders of churches and teachers rise up in the pride of their hearts. Many will openly approve gross sin. And gross is not saying like, ew, yucky, gross. It's talking about like serious sin or like sins of commission that are very serious. And that will be approved of openly in the world. The righteous will be alerted by the signs of the times. Materialism will be priority over service to others. People will refuse to believe obvious truth and will instead adhere to fables and falsehoods. Many manifestations of pride will cause great damage to society. False prophets, false churches, and false miracles will abound. Preachers will transfigure God's word for personal gain. People refuse to believe the signs of the times. New York, Albany, and Boston destroyed unless. So this is in the Doctrine and Covenants, and it used to be in the older seminary manual. They took it out of the newer manuals, so I'm not really sure how to interpret the fact that that's not really mentioned anymore. However, one thing that David J. Ridges pointed out in his book about this is that there are temples there now, and there have been many who were converted to the church. So, maybe there's a connection between the fact that there are many who accepted the gospel in these areas and temples were built there. Maybe that gives us some idea about the protection and safety that come with having a temple in your midst. So those were some of the things that I thought about with regard to this sign. Okay, and then some will fear that Christ's coming is being delayed too long. How many of you feel that way? Sometimes I feel that way. There will be signs and wonders on earth and in the heavens. The Lamanites will blossom as the rose. So this is a really cool one, and actually on the Book of Mormon Evidence.org, they did a recent article about I guess it was like the placement program that the church had in the days of like Spencer W. Kimball for the Native Americans. And they just did like a whole blog post about that. And they linked it to this sign, the Lamanites will blossom as the rose. And if you guys are interested in that, you should go over to bookofmormonevidence.org and check out their blog. And I believe it was like July 13th or 14th, the date on that article, but it was really interesting. Okay, and then New Jerusalem will be built. Many temples will be built. A temple will be built in Jerusalem. The gospel will flourish in Egypt, and a temple will be built there. The rainbow is withdrawn. Some of the very elect will be deceived. The Constitution will hang by a thread. I think that's been ongoing for a while. Destroying angels will be allowed to go forth upon the earth. So this is something that Wilford Woodruff said actually started with the Salt Lake Temple. And at its dedication, he said that those destroying angels would now be allowed to go forth. And it's basically connected to the sealing. As soon as those sealing ordinances were restored and the temple was not in a situation where it was going to get destroyed again. Like in Nauvoo, they had gotten the temple ordinances barely going, and then they had to flee Nauvoo, and then the temple got destroyed. But when they got to Salt Lake, the saints were able to build a temple that would withstand the test of time. It's supposed to last through the millennium. And at this point, the gospel has been able to go forward. Zion's been able to grow and prosper. And the mission of the church has been able to start being fulfilled. And at that point is when Wilford Woodruff said that the destroying angels would be allowed to go forth upon the earth. So that, we can look that up, but I think Jared from Christian Homestead did do a video on that, and you guys can check that out. There's also an LDS Living article about this, if that interests you. But basically, they've been going forth on the earth all through the 20th century, and it's going to be all the way up till the second coming. There will be an extraordinary increase in blatant lying and deceiving. There will be much truce breaking. There'll be more and more members of the church who remain strong and faithful as the time of the second coming draws near. And I really hope that's true. I hope that there are more and more members of the church who remain strong. Spirits of devils will work many miracles, deceiving many. The abomination of desolation will take place again. The Lord will hasten his work in its time. I do feel like the work is hastening. I think every year that increases. Wickedness will be rampant. Babylon will fall. I am looking forward to that day. A great hailstorm will destroy the crops of the earth. There will be a great earthquake such as never before. Waters will flow from the temple in Jerusalem and heal the Dead Sea. And I think this is something that is both figurative and maybe will have a literal manifestation, but there's a lot we could talk about on that one too. The Battle of Armageddon, the meeting at Adam-on-Diamond, 2 prophets will be killed in Jerusalem. This one is, again, another one where this comes from the book of Revelation mostly. There are some other scriptures that people try to tie into it. I think it's a little bit of one of those topics similar to the 10 tribes and how it occurs, where you'll see that there's differing opinions on it and what exactly that looks like. So that's another one where you could kind of dig into it, but I have a lot of commentary about that one. And personally, I'm not 100% sure that it is literal in the way that a lot of people interpret it. I do think that the book of Revelation is, in my view, after having studied it so much, I read like 5 books on this. I have so much commentary on it. I view the book of Revelation as a temple text. I view it as the plan of salvation being told from start to finish. And I view it all very much using symbolism. And I think once you start realizing that John the Revelator, that literally everything in there, including the 2 witnesses that is mentioned in the book of Revelation, he is referring back to something in the Old Testament. When you see what he's referring back to, you start to get the sense that there's an idea that he's conveying more than he is conveying like a literal like thing that's going to happen the way that we might imagine it in a movie. It's more of like a large, broad idea that pertains to different points in time, the way that he has that structure built out with each seal containing a certain period of that history that pertains to the plan of salvation and our time here in mortality. So there are some interesting things about that, and I don't know that there's really any good conclusion. It's probably another one of those where you have to sort of like live in some esoteric space and rely a little bit on theory to sort of have an idea of what that could mean and what it could look like. But it's an interesting one. Let's see, the Mount of Olives will split in 2. The sign of the coming of the Son of Man. I have commentary on this, lots of commentary on that. And my favorite is actually by Gerald Lund. He, just the way he broke it down, it was just so obvious. He like literally just went through the way that Joseph Smith worded it. And maybe I'll do a video on that. But it was really interesting, his conclusion about it, and I feel like I kind of agreed with him. He's just so simple and logical, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate the signs, and I think that's one that has gotten overcomplicated. Let's see. The righteous will be taken up to meet the coming of the Lord. The wicked will be burned, and everyone will see Christ when he comes. So those are all the signs that he has listed. He has lots of commentary and scriptures on each of those. And I guess I'm just curious what you guys are curious to know about that we can dig into. Like I said, I have a lot on the 2 prophets, the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. I've been working on a man named David. This one's harder. I'm not even 100% sure if I have an opinion about that one at this point. Some of them I kind of do. I'm pretty open-minded. I tend to leave like the book open on the table because I feel like I'm always learning. I don't know everything. I try not to get too dogmatic about any one of these signs because there's just so much, and I feel like it's impossible for me to collect all of it and have all of it in my mind at any given time and to really process it all. So I try to keep an open mind. I look at scholars and I look at what the brethren are saying. I look at our Institute manual. And I try to put all of that together and just kind of keep to the idea that, I need to remember the core eternal doctrine and not get too dogmatic about things where it's in this space right here where you can see that there's differing opinions, even among the brethren, where there's really not like a solid answer. There is some room for supposition, and some of these like signs of the times very much fall into this esoteric teaching space because they're so vague or they're just not spelled out perfectly. And there's a lot of people who think that they have it all figured out, and I'm just not one of those people. I don't feel that way at all. And I don't really even see it in the people who think that they have it figured out. I don't really see it. I see a lot of just flawed thinking in these people who go around preaching like they just know every single thing that's supposed to happen. I appreciate when people do that and they put their ideas out there, and I take it all with a grain of salt because I just don't know how any one of us could possibly fully grasp every single one of these core doctrines, all the supporting teachings, all the policies that have ever pertained to it, plus all the scholarship that's ever been done on it. It just doesn't seem like a human capability to me. But I don't know. Everybody has their opinion. People are always like, oh, well, the Spirit spoke to me and they confirmed this to me. But it's like you see, 100 people with the same reasoning there. Like, well, the Spirit spoke to me and gave me something different. And it's like, well, obviously we're not all right. So I try to keep an open mind, especially on things like these, like the two prophets or the lost tribes and exactly what that's going to look like when they return. Or, a man named David will lead the church. I try to just learn and like kind of take it all in and not get super dogmatic. And I hope that you guys are willing to do that too, because I'm not really interested in arguing with people about it. I think it's just a waste of my time. But I hope that book is maybe something that you guys might be interested in, and maybe some of these signs you'd want to talk about. And I've done lots of research on just different topics about them, the things that he's noted here in this book, and I'd love to dive deeper into some of these with everyone. So anyway, I just wanted to show that book off here, showcase it, and just explain that it was an influence on me, and it's something that I've enjoyed studying. I feel like I've learned a lot about just the gospel in general as I've tried to study more on each of these topics, and particularly I think my biggest takeaway is just how vital Joseph Smith's role is and Brigham Young's role was in helping to get the church going so that the mission of the church could be fulfilled, so that the priesthood keys could do what they were meant to do in the last days, which is to gather Israel. And I just want to bear my testimony once again that I know the church is true. I know that our prophet and apostles, they hold the keys of the everlasting gospel. They're doing the work that the Lord had laid out in the Doctrine and Covenants for us to do. They're gathering Israel in all the nations. They're trying to reach the places where maybe the gospel is still closed. And it'll happen. We'll get there. And, we'll be ready when the Lord comes. And some might not. There may be some personal or individual apostasy that occurs. So there's definitely a separating of the wheat and the tares that occurs. And that's in here too. But we want to be those people, and we can choose to be the ones who are going to stay true and faithful. And I just want to leave you these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.